Okay. Very good morning, guys. Okay. So last day we have been talking about constructors, right? So what is a constructor? I said you a constructor is a special method defined in a class, and this method is actually responsible for initializing the fields of a class. A constructor is a special method that is defined in a class, actually responsible for initializing the fields of a class. Are you clear? So what it will do? It will initialize the fields that are defined for you inside of a class. Now, what is the name of the constructor? Your class name only. The name of the constructor is exactly the same name of your class. And remember, you can't change that name. You cannot change that name. And moreover, it's a non-value returning method. It is a non-value returning method. The method doesn't return any value. It's a non-value returning method. Okay, now? Third important point is every class requires a constructor to be present in it if at all you want to create the instance of that class. So what is that? Every class requires a constructor to be present in it if you want to create the instance of the class. If a constructor is not present, can't I create the instance of any class? No, you can't. You cannot, guys. You cannot create the instance of any class if a constructor is not defined inside of that class. Point clear? So that's why what did I say? Array, it is mandatory for the developer to define a constructor under his class. It's mandatory for the developer to define a constructor under his class. Otherwise, instance creation will not be possible. And if the developer fails to do so, what did I say? If the developer fails to do so, on behalf of the developer, who will do it? The compiler will define a constructor in the class. What we call it? Implicit constructor. We call that as a implicit constructor. So till now, how many classes we defined? Might be so many, nearly 20-25 classes we defined since we started programming. In the notepad, we defined a class called first. And unfortunately, what we said the last day also, we defined a class called first. Nearly some 25-30 classes we have defined till now. In all these classes, there is a constructor. What constructor? Implicit constructor. Got it or not? Okay, and I already said you how this implicit constructor is going to be defined for you also. And that is the constructor. That implicit constructor is only responsible here for initializing of your fields. That implicit constructor is only responsible for initializing of your particular fields. Yes, guys, that implicit constructor only will do the initialization of your fields basically. So every field will have a default value now? Yes or not? And last day I was telling you about that only. Every field will have a default value, and the default value comes to the field through the implicit constructor. That implicit constructor will take the responsibility of initializing the fields with their appropriate default values. You don't require to do. Who will do that? The constructor does that. Defining of the constructor will be done by the compiler, and now the compiler is going to initialize the fields of your class. Now the compiler is going to initialize the fields of your class. So this is what happens behind the screen. So compulsory, this constructor should be present in all the classes. For example, last day I shown you this, guys. I'm defining a class like this. This is a class what I defined. This is a class what I defined. If you define a class like this, after compilation, it won't look like this now. After compilation, it won't look like this. What will happen after compilation? Inside of the class, you'll find a implicit constructor now. Okay, so watch it guys. After compilation, how the code will be. This is same, but now you'll have a constructor, public test. I is equals to 10. Guys, when you come to SCR, is S initialized? No, no. So what will the constructor do? Constructor will initialize with a default value like this. Is B initialized? No. So initializes with the default value like this. But is I initialized? Yes or not? So constructor also will initialize with the same value. Constructor also will initialize with the same value. If the developer means if I initialize, constructor also will initialize with the same. If I don't initialize, constructor will initialize with the default value. Is it clearer, all of you? Here I initialized, so that's why constructor also has done that. If I don't initialize here, then constructor will initialize with 0, default value of the type. Clearer, ah? And one more thing I said, you remember? What is that? Array, variables will not have a default value. Default value is only for the fields. And I explained you very clearly why a variable doesn't have a default value. Why a variable doesn't have a default value? Because variables are not accessible out of the block, so constructor cannot initialize them. Variables are not accessible out of the block, so constructor cannot initialize them. But what about a field? The scope of a field is throughout the class. Because the scope of a field is throughout the class, constructor is capable of initializing it. Constructor is capable of initializing the fields. This is why a field will have a default value, but not a variable. A variable never has a default value for this reason only. Is it clear, guys? Okay. And now the constructor is implicit constructor, explicit constructor. This is a implicit constructor. Is an implicit constructor. Now understand some few important things here. What? Look at this. First point. Read it. Implicit constructors are public. If the constructor is implicitly defined, that will be a public constructor. Point number 2. Just now I explained you that only. Okay. Third point. Is it clear? You can define your own constructors, guys. You can define your own constructors. So can I define my own constructors? Yes. You can define your own constructors. And don't forget, if you define your own constructor, then implicit constructors won't be defined again. If you define your own constructor, we call it as an explicit constructor, and in such scenarios, implicit constructors will not be defined again in your code. Okay, now. Okay. So when will implicit constructor come into action? Implicit constructors comes into action only when we don't define a explicit constructor. If constructors are explicitly defined, then there will not be implicit constructors again. Are you clearer or not? Array, last class that only I said you guys, it is the responsibility of the developer to define a constructor under his class. And if he fails to do so, on behalf of the developer, who will do that? Compiler will do that. On behalf of the developer, the compiler is going to do that work for us. Okay. So, but if you define a constructor, compiler is not at all responsible in defining a constructor in that code. If you define a constructor, compiler is not at all responsible for defining a constructor in that code now. So either you do it or the compiler will do it. One only will be there. Don't think like you define one constructor, compiler will define another constructor. Never happens. Point clear, all of you? So don't think like you define a constructor, compiler is going to define another constructor. Will never happen. The only chance for one only. Either you should do or compiler should do. That's all. Both, there is no chance for both the two things at all in your project. Only one only can be present. How do you define a constructor, sir? How do you define a constructor? Do you remember how to define a method? Tell me the syntax to define a method. Modifiers. Louder. Void or type. Perfect. Name. Parameter list. And you'll be writing your statements here. You'll be writing your statements here. Okay. Now it is the same syntax to define a constructor also, guys. Only thing is you don't have this. That's all. Because already last class I explained, you know. Don't require to specify that. That is how you differentiate between a method and a constructor. Constructor is also method only. But method will have return type, void or type something, but a constructor will not have. And when you come to the name here, the name is fixed. What is the name? Class name. The name is fixed. That is class name. And you know, parameter list, I explained about the parameter list and all the things. If you define an explicit constructor, if you define an explicit constructor, then compiler will do that. Manoj, compiler will do that for you. It won't define the constructor, but it will initialize the fields for you. It won't define the constructor, but it will initialize the fields for you. The fields will be initialized for you. Okay, fine. Yeah, there's a syntax to define a constructor. So shall we try this now? We'll try defining a constructor on our own, guys. We'll try defining a constructor on our own. Let's do it on our own. How to define this constructor on our own? Let it do this. Wait here. Why you're worried about everything? I'll tell you now. Okay. So let's define a constructor on our own. So to define a constructor, come on. In our project, I'm adding a new class. I will name it as con demo. Any name, your choice. I'm naming it as con demo. In this, I want to write a constructor explicitly now. I'm writing public con demo. Don't forget, this is a explicit constructor. Is an explicit constructor. Console dot write line constructor is called. Okay. Next, I'm writing a method public void. Understand, guys, the difference between the method. Method will have the return type, so you specify, but constructor will not have the return type. And constructor name will be class name, but method name cannot be class name. Array, method name cannot be class name. Okay. Console dot write line. Method is called. See, look, now you have one constructor in the code and you have one method in the code. Will a method execute without being called? Will a method execute without being called? Answer, yeah. Louder. Why you whisper in the mouth? Okay. No, we can't. So a constructor, a method will not be executing without being called. Same like that, a constructor also will not execute without being called. So do I need to call a constructor? Yes, it is mandatory to call a constructor. You must call a constructor also for getting executed. Just like you call a method for execution, you need to call a constructor for execution. Both of them should be called. So how do we call a constructor? Watch it, guys. How do you call a constructor? Static void main. I am creating the instance of the class con demo. cd1 is equals to new condemo. I created the instance of a class. Okay. Now, did I call the method? Guys, did I call the method? Tell me. No, we did not call the method anywhere. We created the instance. We did not call the method. Did I call the constructor? Let us see. I called the constructor. Where do you call the constructor here? Where did you call the story got closed? Where did we call the constructor? Constructor calling is a done while creating the instance of class. Constructor calling is a done while creating the instance of the class. So while creating the instance, we called it. Yes, we called it. Where we called it? Check it out. What did you write here is exactly matching with what did you write here. See. Matching or not, that is the constructor calling. That is the constructor calling. Everything is not called in the same way. Everything has a different way of calling it. Method should be called by using the object. Constructor is called directly while creating the object. While creating the instance only, we call the constructor. After creating the instance, we call the methods. That is the difference. So if you understand my one point here, see, last day I was explaining about this one. What happens when we create the instance of a class? Remember? So three things that are going to happen when you create the instance of a class. Go through them. First one. Reads the classes to identify the members. Second one. Okay. First one. Reads the classes. Do you understand the point? Explained you last day. What is it? It will identify each and every member that is defined in the class. What are the fields in the class? What are the methods in the class? What are the constructors in the class? Properties in the class? Finalizers. Every member is identified. Second step. See there, clearly telling you. Invokes the constructor. The constructor is invoked. When the instance is created, constructor is invoked. Because you are calling it. Because you are calling it, the constructor has to be invoked at that particular place now. It is going to invoke the constructor. So this is how you call a constructor. Okay. So if you observe this point, yeah. If you just observe this one, what are you doing? You're calling a constructor. When are you calling the constructor? When I'm creating an instance. All these things are interlinked with each other. What are that? You create an instance. And in this process, you call the constructor. And in this process, memory is allocated. In this process, the memory is allocated. That is only the third step, remember. Did you understand or not? All these three are interlinked with each other. What is the first thing? You create an instance. And in this process, we call a constructor. We call a constructor. What happens? Memory will be allocated. So now understand who is responsible for memory allocation? Constructor is responsible. Constructor call is responsible for a memory allocation. And when do you call the constructor? Well, creating the instance. So creating an instance will allocate the memory. Why? Because at the time of creating the instance, I will call the constructor. And now that constructor will take the responsibility of allocating the memory. Is it clearer or not? Okay. So instance creation calls constructor, and calling constructor allocates memory to us. Now look here. What is that? Condemo CD2 is equals to new condemo. What are you doing? Creating one more instance. One more time memory allocated na? Last day I shown you. You create multiple instances, multiple times memory gets allocated now. So 2 instances created and 2 times the memory allocation is performed. Two instances created, two times constructor called, two times memory allocated. Last time I drawn and shown you all the things to you. Okay, and now observe it. Am I calling the constructor? Not calling the constructor, you know. That's what we learned yesterday. Not initialized with no memory allocation. You can't call the members now. Correct? You cannot call the members. Okay? So no memory allocation for CD3. It's null. But see, when I say is equals to CD2 or CD1, am I calling the constructor in the third case? Yes, sir. Body present and mind absent. This is constructor calling. You call constructor here. Tell me. No, we did not call the constructor. That is why CD3 doesn't have any memory allocation. Yesterday I said, that doesn't have memory allocation. That doesn't have memory allocation. What will it do? It is consuming the memory of CD2. It is consuming the memory of CD2. See, instance only will have a memory allocation. Why? Because recollect the description for the instance. A copy of a class that is created by using new keyword. Yes or not? Reference. A copy of a class that is initialized by using an existing instance. So memory allocation is only for instance, because instance will call a constructor. Memory allocation will not be present for a reference because it doesn't call a constructor. There is no memory allocation for a reference because reference is not calling the constructor. Who is calling a constructor? Instance is calling. So here we have two memories of three memories. Two memories. One is for CD1, one is for CD2, and CD3 is going and sharing the memory of CD2, but it doesn't have any memory allocation. You can see, guys, run the code and see. Will clearly tell you how many times constructor is called. Not many times only memory is allocated. Two times constructor call means memory allocation is also done for two times. They are directly interlinked with each other. You cannot see the memory. You cannot peep into the RAM and you can see the memory now. But the identification for you is constructor call. Constructor call performed means memory allocation has been done for you behind the skin, because constructor calling and memory allocation are directly linked with each other. See all these three. Instance created. Constructor gets called. Memory gets allocated. Did you understand? What is the first thing? Instance created. Second, constructor is called. Third, memory is allocated. Now come in the reverse order. Memory not allocated means constructor is not called, means the creator is not an instance. It can be a reference. It can be a reference, but not a instance. Okay, now? So how do we call the constructor? How do you call a constructor? While creating the instance, we call the constructor. Now see, understand the syntax of creating an instance. Earlier, I said you wrong, guys. What I said wrong? For instance creation, I said you the statement, remember how? Class name afterwards is equals to new class name, and then I said you list of, and this list of values is optional. We did never used it till now. We'll use it, guys, but I said you wrong. So the thing is not class name here, as a constructor name. Is there any problem if I say class name? Tell me. No, why? Both have the same name only. Class name, constructor name are same. When class name, constructor name are same, you say class name there also, no problem. If you say constructor name also, there is no problem. But I said you class name, but exactly it is constructor. So first what you write is class instance is equals to new. The left hand side code or right hand side code, which is responsible for instance creation? Right hand side code only. See, new constructor, memory automatically gets allocated. Are you clearer now? The left hand side code is no way responsible for instance creation. What is responsible? Right hand side, new constructor name, constructor call, memory allocates. The left hand side code is only to give a name to that instance. Only a name to that instance. You know that? I did not show you. you can create instance like this. Did you catch my point? I can use where keyword there, yeah. But can I use where here? I cannot use where here. I cannot use a where on the right hand side. The right hand side code is instance creation. Left hand side code is only to give a name to that particular instance. You can simply use where there. You can use a dynamic there, anything. The left hand code is only for associating a name. That's all. Okay, but that's not at all responsible for the instance creation. Don't forget this here. These are the simple. Mainly, guys, when you go for an interview as a fresher, they don't ask you anything about web developments or mobile developments or anything. What they expect is the basics, object-oriented programming. If you are good in object-oriented programming, you can build any kind of application. So you're learning the basics. In the future, we'll develop web application. When we develop web application, whatever I explained to you here will come there. All the things, inheritance rules, everything. We still did not start with inheritance. All these things, methods, callings, instance creations, all these things are what will come for us into action. Okay. So always that's what I'm telling you, be perfect in object-oriented programming. If you are perfect in object-oriented programming, every application will be on your fingertips. If you're good in object-oriented programming, there's a fundamental thing is. Are you clear? Okay. So that's what. So now I have two instances and one reference. Can I use all these three for calling methods? CD1, CD2, CD3. Come on. Can I use CD1 and call the method? Yes or not? Can I use CD2 and call the method? Can I use CD3 and call the method? Yes or no? Yes, yaar. Why no? Reference works same as instance we discussed now. Reference works the same as a instance. Reference doesn't have a memory allocation, that's all. But reference is same as a instance. When is it not possible? Now not possible. Why? What is CD3? Variable. Variable means uninitialized copy. It is a uninitialized copy. Because it is an uninitialized copy, they'll give you error. What is it? Last day we saw. Okay, na? Use of unassigned local variable CD3. It's an unassigned local variable CD3 and we cannot call it. We cannot call the appropriate thing. So CD3.demo is invalid. You cannot call it at any point of time. Understood or not? Okay. So, but this is valid. Why? Uninitialized, initialized. That is initialized, but initialized by using an existing instance, but not a new instance. Are you clear with the constructor and constructor calling, all of you? Yes or not? Okay. So we understood now how to define a constructor on our own. Very simple process. If at all you wanted to define a constructor, we can just define a constructor on our own, and the syntax is exactly same as a method syntax. Only thing missing is void name. I'm coming to name. Name is fixed. What name? Class name. Name is fixed here. Class name only will come there. Okay. So we have just been defined one class here now. What is the class name? Condemo. We define a class called Condemo, and inside of the class, we are just going to write our code. Condemo, one constructor and one method. And finally, we called all these things from there. Any doubts with anything? Tell me. Constructors are two types here. Constructors are two types. What are the two types? One, default, and two is parameterized. The first one is default. Second one is parameterized. Sir, what is default and what is parameterized? So now your question will be, what is a default constructor and what is a parameterized constructor? Okay, let me explain you. What's a default constructor and what is a parameterized constructor? Say, A constructor without any parameters is called as a default constructor. Array, a constructor without any parameters is what we call as a default constructor. And right now, what you defined is default constructor only. You define a constructor now or not? And the constructor, what you defined right now is default constructor. Okay. And what is the parameterized constructor? We already taught a method without a parameters and a method with parameters. Same way, a constructor without a parameters, a constructor with parameters. If a constructor is defined with parameters, we call that as a parameterized constructor. If a constructor is defined with any parameters, we call that as a parameterized constructor. Got my point or not? Okay. So that's what. So two types of constructors. One is default and the second one is parameterized constructor. Now understand about this one. What? Let me define you one construct in the code. Observe all of you. One more example I'll show you. I will define a class here. We'll name it as the previous class is condemo. Let me call it as the param condemo, parameterized constructor demo. Okay, now in this, let's define a constructor public. And now you see parameterized. It is parameterized. So console dot parameterized is called, and I'm printing there the value of I. I'm printing there the value of I. Parameterized constructor is called and the value of I gets printed. Now define a main method. Okay, all of you, watch. I'm going to create the instance of the class param condemo cd1 is equals to new param condemo. Creating an instance. I'm creating a instance. When I create an instance, all of you observe it carefully. You have a red line under param condemo. Just a second. Yeah, you have a red line under the param condemo. Why? That's an error. Why the error? Because the constructor call is not matching the constructor signature, all of you. Constructor call is not matching the constructor signature here. Not matching? No, not matching. See, what did you write here is exactly matching with what did you write here or not? But look guys, what did you write here is not matching with what did you write here. Are you clear? Why not matching? Because it's asking for a parameter and you're not passing it now. Now matching? 100 is the integer value what I am supplying to it. See, a method call should match the method signature. A method call should match the method signature. If the method is taking two parameters, can you call without passing them? Mandatory to pass. Same way, constructor call should match the constructor signature. So what to do? If a constructor is parameterized, listen, if a constructor is parameterized, values to those parameters should be sent while creating instance of the class. Point clear or not? I repeat again. If a constructor is parameterized, values to those parameters should be sent while creating the instance. You need to send all the required values while creating the instance. So right now, we are passing on the values while creating the instance of it. If you look at this, I am passing the value 100. The value 100 goes to I and run the code. You should see the output now. Understood or not? And now you see here, I'm creating multiple instances. CD2, CD3, and I'm passing different set of values. Okay, now? And that is only our syntax here, guys. We did not talk about it till now. Why? I need them only when the constructors are parameterized. Did you understand the two types of constructors? What was the first type? Default. Second one, parameterized. Default constructors are also called parameterless constructors. Default or parameterless. Second one, parameterized. Okay, now answer this question. Who can define a default constructor? Who can define a default constructor? Compiler. Can't we define? Can't we define? You defined now already in the first program. You defined it now in the con demo. Who can define a default constructor? A compiler can define, or a developer also can define. Compiler can define, or a developer also can define. Who can define a parameterized constructor? Developer only can define. Don't forget this point. Developer only can define, but a compiler can never define a parameterized constructor. A compiler defined constructor is always default constructor only. Are you clearer or not? Okay, tomorrow there is a question in interview like this. What is the question, you know? I have a predefined class, or there is a predefined class. There is a predefined class, and in the class there is a default constructor. Is it implicitly defined or explicitly defined? Come on. Louder. Wrong answer. If not implicitly defined, your second answer will be explicitly. That's all. Huh? Both are wrong answer. Both are wrong here. Implicitly also wrong, explicitly also wrong. And what is the answer here? I can't say that. Array constructor is default means how can you say that can be defined by a compiler, that can be defined by a programmer? Just now we discussed about that only. What's it? Default constructor can be defined by a compiler or developer also. Developer also can do that. Programmer defined, developer defined. If compiler defined, that is implicit. If developer defined, that is explicit. Who defined me? How do I know? You're telling predefined class. The person who defined the class, did he define a constructor or not? I did not see. Yes or not? So if he did not define, who will define? Compiler defines. So what is the answer for this is? I can't say. If you say implicit, is wrong, your next answer will be explicit. Correct? But that's a blunder. That's what I'm telling you. Both are wrong answers in this case. We cannot say whether that is implicitly defined or whether that is explicitly defined. Okay? Next, see. Now you can say what? Explicitly defined. That is explicitly defined. Why? Because that is a parameterized constructor, and parameterized constructors cannot be implicitly defined. If constructor is implicitly defined means guarantee that is a default constructor. If a constructor is a parameterized constructor, then that's a guarantee that is explicitly defined. Did you understand what I'm telling you now? If a constructor is a implicitly defined, if a constructor is implicitly defined, it is guarantee that is default. Are you clear? If a constructor is explicitly defined, then you did not understand the question first. Default or parameterized also can be there now. Oh, you're just only trying to give an opposite answer for that. You're not understanding a question. What is my question? If a constructor is implicitly defined, then it's a guarantee. What? That is default. If a constructor is explicitly defined, then it can be default or parameterized also. Yes or not? The question can be twisted and asked, yeah. The first thing, be a good listener first. You should be a good listener. Okay? Don't hurry and answer the appropriate thing. What is the problem, if you ask something about a constructor means, you start telling whatever you know about a constructor, that's all. Is the answer related or don't related or not bothered for me? That what, don't do that mistake. Listen first what he was expecting from you. Is it clear? Okay? Clear and clear answers. Don't try to pretend something you don't know as you know. Something you don't know, be fair. I don't know. Understood my point? Okay? And don't try to argue with the interviewer also. You say something, you say that is wrong. Okay? You say that is wrong. Don't try to argue, no, it's right. Don't try to argue with him, no, it is right. Okay? So the diplomatic answer will be like, this is what I know. This is what I know. Maybe you are also right. I'll verify. Okay? Don't try to argue because right now your hair is in his hands until the interview is completed. Correct? So try to be diplomatic in the answers. Okay? And most of the people, just when you go to the interview, going in formals is very, very important. See, when you go as a fresher, dress code is very important. When you just go as an experience, that all doesn't matter. But when you go as a fresher, these are very, very important. Okay. Recently in our company, some interviews are conducted. Not for .NET team, SAP. We have SAP, .NET, all so many things in our SAP interviews are conducted. One person came to an interview. You wore a jeans, in shirt. Okay, fine. Put the resume in his pocket and came. The HR manager did not even interview. Get out from there. From the out gate only, from the gate outside only, send it. You mannered here. Well, manners is very, very important first. Okay, how you go to the interview, how you present yourself, your body language plays a very crucial role in the interview. The HR manager did not even call him for the interview, did not even, you may be having a good knowledge also, but we don't want you. Send him out from the gate only. Okay, that's what. Be clear and careful when you go to interview. One person came to interview, he did not bring a resume. Where is your resume? I send a resume. You will send a resume. Don't you carry a resume on your own? That is the first fundamental. You require to carry a resume first. You might be sending a resume to the company, but it is your responsibility to carry a resume. Understood? Okay. And another thing is, don't try to copy paste resumes from someone's. Don't try to copy paste resume from someone. Someone creates a resume and you copy paste. He will write all the nonsense. You too will write the same thing. You don't know what is it also, you will put in that. What you put in the interview, what you put in the resume should be exactly what you know. Don't try to put anything what you don't know. Is it clear? Okay. So try to put only what you know. So many people write, what are your hobbies? What are your hobbies? Watching movies. A hobby, yeah. You write watching movies is an hobby. Okay. See, you're portraying yourself, you're a lazy kid. You're portraying yourself, you're a lazy kid. Watching movies, sitting idle and watching movie. That is your hobby. Understood? Okay. Something should be some dynamic. Like, say, one person once I watched in a resume. Your strengths and weakness. What is your weakness? Hardworking. Hardworking is my weakness. See how is it trying to portray his character? Is it trying to portray his character in such a positive way? Hardworking is my weakness. Did you get my point? Okay, we love hardworking. His weakness, his strength, no? But he portrayed himself, his character. Hardworking is my weakness. Means I don't come out of it until the job is completed. Did you understand me? That's what. So English is very, very. It's just going to be a funny language, like a funny language. The same word will give you a different meaning in different situations. Understood the point or not? The same word will give you different meaning in different situations. All of you might watch this movie, guys. Rajinikanth's Robo movie, the part 1. Remember that? In that, Rajinikanth brings the robo to the home and introduces to his mother. And tells to his mother, this will help you in your day-to-day activities. And the mother asks to switch on the TV. He will directly remove the TV and break it. That's what. The same word will give you different meanings in different scenarios. Okay, how you're trying to use the words is important. Are you clear? So just one suggestion I can give you while preparing your resumes, while preparing there's so many articles online here, how to prepare a resume. Try to watch them, try to go them. Even in our Naresh IT YouTube channel also, YouTube/Naresh IT. In the Naresh IT YouTube channel also, they have posted so many videos on the CRT. For freshers, I'm telling you, mainly for the freshers. You're experienced, you already have all this knowledge, but mainly for the freshers, how to prepare a resume, what should be in a resume and what should not be in a resume. Clear? And also about CRT, lot of videos we have posted. So whenever you have time, utilize the time first. Utilize your time basically for that. Okay, and another advantage you have, I'll tell you. Earlier, is before the COVID, interviews are 3 rounds, 4 rounds of interviews. But today we don't have here, only 1 round. If you can clear 1 round of interview, immediately you'll get an appointment letter. Right now, the situation is like this in the industry. They want people. They want people. In a single round of interview only, they're just closing it. Yesterday, one of the student was telling, he went for interview morning 10 o'clock. He went for interview morning 10 o'clock. And by 4 o'clock, he got the confirmation. Earlier interviews, we used to like long time, wait for the interview, call back, first round, second round. 10 o'clock, the interview was scheduled. 4 o'clock, he got the confirmation. He was selected. So that's like, they want people, guys. They want people. So if you have a good knowledge, basic fundamentals, I'm not telling you, oh, get advanced knowledge also. Basic fundamentals, if you're good. If the company can feel you, you're a learner. You're a learner. And if the interviewer feels you, you will learn. If you will learn, okay, that's enough. He will recruit you. Are you clear? They don't expect any great knowledge from a fresher. From the fresher, what they expect is whether you are a good learner or not. Yes, if he feels you are a learner, automatically he will select you. Okay, even though you fail in answering all the questions. If you can answer 50% of the questions, and if the interviewer feels you're a good learner, automatically your place is confirmed. Sometimes you have 70%, 80%, but you have show your attitude, even though you clear 80% also, you won't be selected. There are all the things that are very important in the interview process. Your body language and how you're presenting and how you're portraying yourself. So my suggestion for all is prepare a resume first, and what you put in the resume, should be only what you know. Don't put unnecessary things in the resumes first. Clear? You don't know something, but you write there. Interview will ask you only what is present in the resume. Simple, I'll tell you here, a resume is a mirror copy of you. A resume is your mirror copy. It should reflect your character. It should reflect your, it should portray your character. Okay? Try watching the videos in the Naresh YouTube channel. Also, a lot of videos are there. Oh, so many YouTube videos are available about preparing a resume. Go through them. Okay? So basically, they try to confuse you in interview. The question can be twisted and asked. So listen to the question carefully. What he was expecting. You don't understand? No problem. Ask him to repeat the question. No matter. Okay? Don't think like you should not ask for repeating the question. Ask him to repeat if you don't understand the question. Fine. Just understand first what he was expecting and try to answer in the way. Clearer? Okay? So remember all these things. These are also simple guidelines here, putting stepping stones. If you just make all these things particular within 3-4 months, you will be ready for an interview. And when an interview call is there, suppose you have an interview call, you don't know, you're not 100% in the subject. You see, after becoming a perfect, I'll go to subject that is wrong. You will never become perfect in the subject. I am teaching .NET from 15 years. I am teaching .NET from 15 years. I only know 20%. I only know 20%. It's an ocean here. No one can become perfect in that. Are you clear? Go start learning. When you start learning, you will become perfect on it. You start, explore, you become perfect on the subject. You will never become subject. Go for as many number of interviews as possible. If you fail them also, not an issue, but that will help you in going for the next interview. How to go for the next interview. Once you come out of the interview, all of you make this habit also. Once you come out of interview, the first thing you do, you know, what questions he has asked, write them first. You come out of the interview, immediately write down all the questions and prepare the answers for that. 3 or 4 interviews you go, 50% of the questions will be same here. So first interview you did not answer, you did not prepare, go to second interview, there also same question asked, there also you made the same mistake, and how how funny it will be, you understand now. That's what you need to learn from your mistakes. So when you go to an interview, whatever questions he asked, prepare a notes for that. Next time, prepare that. 4 or 5 interviews you go, 6th interview, automatically you'll get 100% questions from this particular thing also. You won't go anything out of the scope. It will become easy. Attend for interviews. That's what I'm telling you. As many number of interviews possible, attend them. Don't go to the interview to get selected. Go to the interview to get used to it. Is it clear? You must be used to the interviews. Say, you will become 100% perfect in the subject. 100% you're perfect in the subject. You go to interview, first interview you go. I'll give you guarantee 99% you'll fail. The first thing, you're 100% subject in the perfect in the subject also. But when you go to the interview the first time, okay, under the table, your legs will be shivering. That is guarantee. Yes or not? Whatever he asks, you know. But you cannot answer that. So that's why I'm telling you, get used to the interviews. Clear? 4 or 5 interviews you go, 6th of them will become an habit. That's all. Okay? Don't always be worried about the failures. Don't always be worried about the failures. Okay? A failure will not be a stoppage for you. I say you. When I came to Hyderabad here, basically I said you, my background is, I did not come from a computer background at all. My graduation is BCom. And I done my post-graduation MBA. MBA, that too not computer, IT also, MBA marketing. So I just went for a walk-in interview for Oracle. There a walk-in interview for Oracle. The interview was in April here. In April, how hot you have in Hyderabad, you know. And that many number of people came. They made people to stand on the road only. That many number of people came to the interview. So at the time, means no more software companies. We have less software companies in Hyderabad, but today so many companies came. So at that point of time, there are so many number of interview rounds. There are so many rounds in that. Nearly the machine test, that test, they conducted 5 rounds of interviews. My final round is HR round. I cleared all the 5. In the HR round, he rejected me, telling that I'm not from a non-technical background. If I stop there, I would have not come to this position. I would have not come to this particular position. So that's a failure. A failure is not a stoppage for you. Okay? You learn from that. And see, and one more thing is, all of you run towards big companies. But I say you, in the starting days of your career, companies only you will learn more, not in the big companies. In the small companies only you learn more. Always you say this is a big company, CMM level 5 company, level 6. You say check about that one. Don't see that, guys. In the starting days, in the small companies only you will learn more than the big companies. And second thing is, so many people, sir, 2 years bond, sir. Yes, 2 years bond, you need to write, guys. Array, 2 years you will learn only, yaar. You are not productive, you know that? In the 2 years, you will only be learning, you will not productive. Why they ask you to sign a bond for 2 years? Why? Company invest a lot of money on you. Okay? You know, you will not be productive for the first 1 year. You will not write even a single line of code. You won't get any output from you at all. In this 1 year, you will be learning. A lot of money the company invest on you. And all you learn everything. And directly jump out the company. And what the fools are investing that much money on you. Today, bond is compulsory. That is compulsory. Minimum 2 years bond they're asking. Just 2 years. What I say is 2 years bond, sir. 2 years bond, 2 years. You work in a company, guys. So don't jump the companies for 6 months and 1 year. If you jump like this, after some point of time, no one will give you a job at all. You put in your resume, see 4 or 5 companies you change in 3 years, you will not be selected at all. Why you won't be selected? You're a frequent jumper. You won't be staying in a company. Every company, what they expect you, a long-term commitment, not like jumping frequently. So minimum in the starting stages, I say you minimum 3 years work in a company. Until the 3 years are completed, I suggest no one to jump out of the company. Don't do that mistake. You will learn first. Fundamentals will become strong. 2 years, you will not be productive at all. After 2 years, another 1 year, you will be productive. That's all. Okay. So don't do these silly mistakes. Don't run behind the salaries in the starting stages here. Don't run behind the salaries in the starting stages. In the starting stages, always think about learning the subject. Once you are perfect, salaries will automatically come to you. If you are good here, money will automatically come. That's not a matter. Okay. Put all these things in the mind here. Just prepare well accordingly for this. So your 3-4 months, plan perfectly. That's what I suggest you all. Okay. Now coming back to our subject. Yeah. Where we stopped it? Yeah, about implicit and explicit constructors. If the constructor is default, we cannot say that is a implicit or explicit constructor. But if the constructor is a parameterized, we can guarantee say that. What is that? Constructor is an explicit constructor. The constructor is a explicit constructor. That is guaranteed. No doubt about it. Okay, fine. Now, yeah, all of you can observe. This is what the syntax for creating an instance. We already learned it. We already learned about the syntax for creating an instance. Class name, instance name is equals to new constructor name, and pass on the list of variables. And going forward, see this one, an example. Con demo obj is equals to new con demo. And what is that? You're calling the constructor there. That's a call to your constructor. You'll be calling the constructor over there. Okay. Yeah. Now tell me this one here. Tell me this one. Constructors are implicitly defined or explicitly defined? Constructors are implicitly defined or explicitly defined? Both. Both is the wrong answer. Constructors are implicitly defined or explicitly defined. Both is a wrong answer. What do you mean by both? You two can define, compiler also can define. Huh? You're telling that only. Either or. Either implicit or both is wrong answer. What do you mean by both? You know, I define, compiler define. Never happens. If you define, compiler won't define. Are you getting me? So what is the answer? Either or. Okay. Constructors are implicitly called or explicitly called? Constructors must be implicitly called or explicitly called? Explicitly called. Constructors must be explicitly called. They are not implicitly called. Defining, calling are two different aspects. Understand carefully. Defining a constructor is like cooking the food. Defining a constructor is like cooking the food. Who can cook the food? You can cook, or someone also can cook for you. Am I right? Eating the food. You only should eat the food. Yeah. If someone eat your food, your hunger doesn't satisfy. Did you catch my point or not? Eating the food must be done by you only. If I eat the food, your hunger satisfies. Or if you eat the food, my hunger satisfies. But I can define a constructor for you. Sorry, I can cook the food for you, or you can cook the food for me. But eating should be done by us only. So understood the difference now? Defining is like cooking. Calling is like eating. Calling is explicit. Defining can be either or, implicit or explicit also. Okay, two chances are there. Implicitly defined, explicitly defined. You can see, read that. Louder, yeah. Or explicitly. And the answer is either or. Next. Or explicitly. Okay. And the answer is pretty clear. What is that? Must be called explicitly. There is no chance for implicit calling now. There is no chance for implicit calling now. Okay. The constructor call must always be an explicit call. And then we talked constructors are two types. What are the two types? Default constructor. And the second option is going to be a parameterized constructor. And I explained about both the two things to you in detail. Are you clear? The two different types of constructors and how to define them, I just showed you. We defined another class called paramcon demo with a parameter here, and I just passed on the values and got the results. Okay. Now, a big question here is, someone already raised this particular question. Sir, when I don't define a constructor, do I have an implicit constructor in my code? Tell me. When I don't define a constructor, do I have an implicit constructor? Come on, confidently. Yes, sir, we have an implicit constructor. Yes or not? Is this constructor mandatory or optional for instance creation? Is the constructor mandatory or optional for instance creation? Mandatory. Okay, constructor is mandatory. And if I don't define also, no problem, there is a implicit constructor. If I don't define also, no problem, there is a implicit constructor. Then what all our doubt will be, sir, then why should I define a constructor again? Array, why should I define a constructor again? Compiler is doing no, sir. Compiler is defining a constructor. Then what is the point of me defining a constructor again now? Did you catch my point or not? So this can be a big question in the interview tomorrow. What is the question? What is the need of defining a constructor explicitly when there are implicit constructors which can be used for creating the instances? Are you clearer? Can you answer? Come on, can you answer? What is the need of defining a constructor again when there are implicit constructors already available in your class? Louder here. We need to pass. Confidently tell, yaar. If they're wrong, someone will hit you or what? Tell confidently. That's what I'm telling you. Confidence. Yeah. Why to define constructors explicitly means there are multiple reasons why we define a constructor explicitly. One is what you said is right. What is it? Implicit constructors are default. Implicit constructors are default. And unfortunately, what is the problem with default constructors? Default constructors will initialize the fields of a class either with the default value of the type or a given fixed value. Or a given fixed value. What is the meaning of it? Look, all of you. I'll explain you in detail. Yesterday, you defined a class called first, remember? In this, you declared a public field X with a value 100, right? Today, I'm writing another class called second. Just same like first, I will write another class called second. Yeah, second. Yeah. Here also, let us go for a public field. Public int X. I'm not assigning any value. Here, public int X 100. Here, public int X. I did not assign any value. Now let me define a new class here. I'll call the new class as test classes. Test classes. And here I'm writing a main method. And tell me, can I create the instance of the class first here? Forgot already. Can I create the instance of the class first here? Yes, now we already discussed on all these things. You can create the instance of one class in another class. So I want to create the instance of the class first here. First, created an instance. Okay. Now look, guys, I'm creating 3 instances for the class. How many? So last class I explained you 3 instances created, 3 times memory allocated, 3 copies of X. And under all the 3 instances, the value of X is 100 only. Yes or not? The value of X is 100 only. Same way I am creating 3 instances of the class second also. 3 instances of the class second also. Okay. Now here also we have 3 times memory allocated, 3 copies of X now. And in all the 3 copies of X, the value of X will be 0 only. Why 0? Default value. Why 100? We are given a value. So what is the drawback with default constructor? See, in both the 2 classes, we have a default constructor only now. Yes or not? Or implicit constructor. More clearly telling, in both the 2 cases, what we have is a implicit constructor. And implicit constructor is always a default constructor. So what is the problem with implicit constructor? Implicit constructor will initialize fields of a class with the same values when we create multiple instances. That value can either be a fixed given value or the default value. In the first case, it is fixed given value. Second case, it is default value. Understood? So what is the problem, sir? What is the problem is, say, your father has given you a permission for you to purchase 3 new dresses. You're asking your father to purchase some new dresses, and your father has given you permission to purchase the 3 new dresses now. 3 new dresses. So you went to the store now to purchase 3 new dresses now. Tell me, are you going to purchase the same color, same pattern? You purchase the same color, same pattern. That looks really funny. Why? You have an option to purchase 3 dresses and you purchase the same color and same pattern. All are same. Okay? You purchased everything same now. Now 3 days continuously you wore the new dress. 3 new dresses you wear 3 days. What your friends will ask you? Why are you wearing the same dress again? Yes or not? You know these are 3 new dresses. But people don't know. All the people will think you are wearing the same dress. Are you purchasing uniform to go with the new? That's foolish. Yes or not? When I given you option for creating 3 instances, then what is the point of creating all the 3 instances with the same value now? Did you catch my point or not? I given you an option for creating 3 instances. When you have an option of creating 3 instances, creating all the 3 instances with the same value doesn't look funny now. That is what the mistake you're doing. That is what the mistake what we are doing in this case. So even I create multiple instances, under all the instances, the values will be same. What value? Either default value or the fixed given value. Either it can be default value or it can be fixed given value. In the same, in the first case, the fixed given value. In the second case, default value. But see, when you are given an option to purchase the 3 new dresses, what you think of purchasing? 3 different patterns, 3 different colors. Yes or not? So then it looks good. Then you wear 3 new dresses. Also, people understand these are 3 new things. Clear? So, but here I don't have the chance. That is the drawback of implicit constructors. So to resolve this problem, we start defining constructors explicitly. We start defining the constructors explicitly. And one more thing, remember, if you define constructor explicitly, 99% of the times that will be parameterized only. Did you get my point or not? Sir, not default. Why to define default? Your compiler will define default if you don't do that. Got it or not? So what type of constructor is best to define always? Parameterized. Now see, come to class second. Here I'll define a parameterized constructor. Okay, public second. Public second. Int A. Now tell me the constructor is default or parameterized? If it is a parameterized constructor, now passing value to this constructor while creating instance is mandatory or optional? Means when I am going to create the instance, I should pass a value. See error under all the 3 constructor calls there. Yes or not? Now I am passing a value. What is the value? I am passing a value 100 here. I am passing a value 200 here. I am passing a value 300 here. Now this 100 what I pass here will first come to, am I right? Now I am writing x is equals to a. Watch the difference. The 3 instances have the same value or 3 separate values. Did you understand me? So why do you define a constructor in your code now? We define constructor in your code to initialize the fields with user given values. Got it or not? What is that? We define constructors in our class to initialize the fields with user given values because implicit constructor, and the implicit constructor is will always initialize fields with the same value, which can either be the default value of the type or a fixed given value. Where that fixed given value will be, declaration time only will give that. not dynamically. Declaration time only will give that. So did you understand the description, all of you? Yes or not? This is the first reason why we define constructors in our class. This is the first important reason why we define constructors in your class. Second, see, we learned our parameterized methods now. Using parameters, can I pass values to a method for execution or not? We can pass some values. And by passing parameters to a method, we make that method dynamic. Explained you the things to you already. We defined a method to print multiplication table of 5. We defined a method to print the multiplication table of a given number. 2 examples are shown you, right? Okay. Same way, parameterized. See, when constructors are defined, mostly what I said, 99% they're parameterized. Yes or not? So, by using these constructors, by defining parameterized constructors, you can make the complete class dynamic. Method parameters will make a method dynamic. Constructor parameters will make a class dynamic, not constructor dynamic. What is it? The whole class becomes dynamic. Means I have 10 methods in a class. All these 10 methods require some set of values to execute. All the 10 methods require some set of values to execute. Without passing the same values 10 times, pass it through a constructor. So if you pass it through a constructor for one time, through a constructor one time, all methods can use the values. Did you catch my point or not? Okay, I'll show you. I'll show you a practical example. One more topic is there. Once I finish it, I'll tell you a case study how ATM systems run in the real time. I'll tell you a case study how the ATM systems run in the real time. So in that case study, I will explain you each and every point. I'll show you each and every point what I explained to you. Means instance creation, multiple instance creations, security, reusability, all these things I'll practically show you. Okay. So what I'm telling you, method parameters will make a method dynamic, but constructor parameters will make class dynamic. Okay, I'll show that practically. Third, generally guys, every class will be requiring some values for execution. Every class will be requiring some values for execution. The values that are required for a class to execute are always sent to the class, to the constructor of the class. The values that are required for a class to execute are always sent to the class through constructor of the class. What is the meaning of that? Actually, guys, in the future, we'll be working with the database programming. We'll work with the databases. When we work with the database, your application is a separate software, database is a separate software. User will enter the data in the application and the data should be stored in database. Where user will enter application, where should I store database? Now, these two are two separate applications where your application should talk with the database now. Your application should talk with the database. If an application wants to talk with the database, it should open a connection with the database. It should open a connection with the database. How's that? How to open? In our .NET, we have a predefined class. What is the name, Connection. You should create the instance of this class and this class will help you in connecting to the database now. So create the instance now. Is equals to new connection. After creating the instance, we call con dot open. Array, simple English here. Connection dot open now. It will open the connection. But the question is, which database? Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, Sybase, Ingress, DB2, which database? Did you understand my point? Sorry, did you understand my question? Which database it is going to connect? Where did you tell that? You are telling SQL Server. What basis you are telling SQL Server? I'll say Oracle. If we say Oracle, I'll say Sybase. Where is the information here? You don't have that information there now. Suppose if it is SQL Server, what is the user ID? What is the password? Did you understand me or not? You started learning SQL classes now? When you open the SQL Server, first it will ask you enter user ID password. Without that, you can't connect at all first. Did you get my point or not? Then without any information, con dot open means to whom will it connect now? Are you clear? all that information should be passed through the constructor here. You're required to specify the details here. Are you clearer? You're required to specify the details here. To what? To which database you want to connect with. I want to connect with SQL Server. I want to connect with SQL Server. On SQL Server, you will have a container called a database on which you create the tables. You learn. You're going there, you learn. You have a container called as database. On the database, you'll, just like we have namespaces under it, we have projects here. Na? There is a database under which the tables are created. You're required to tell the name of the database. Suppose the database name is something, MyDB. That's a database name. And then you're required to tell the username. Then you're required to tell the password. All these details are required. Now, when you provide all the details, the class will understand. What will understand? It has to connect to SQL Server. On SQL Server, there is a database with the name called MyDB. And to connect it, use this credentials and connect. Now, see, this class requires the values to execute now. And when you're passing, through constructor, you pass. Why? Initially, only the values are important, not later. When you need, initially, only the values are important. So, what's it? Every class requires some values to execute, and the values that are required for a class to execute are always sent to the class through the constructor of the class. This is the third usage of the class. Are you clear with the 3 points I said you? 3 usages of your constructor. Clearer? Understood my point? Okay, guys, whatever I say, I'll show you practically. But before that, you read the notes carefully and try to practice what is present. Remaining all the things I will practically show you going forward. Okay, now let's stop here. We'll meet tomorrow.